ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Dino's Gaming, where we learn to be a better player. Today, we're finally checking out the Cunning leaders from Legends of the Force, following up on Dino's Lukewarm takes. And without any further ado, let's go ahead and jump right in. Today, we're going to be talking about Barriss Offee, Grand Inquisitor, Qui-Gon Jinn, and Kestis. So first up, we have Barriss Offee. First of all, what kind of name is this? Clearly, whoever came up with this was just sitting at a coffee shop and decided that, hey, I'm going to make a character called Barista Coffee. Okay. Anyways, let's go ahead and check out what Barriss does. So action, use the Force, play an event from your hand. It costs 1 less. It flips on 6 for 4/7, fairly average stat line for a 6-cost leader deploy. Action, use the Force, play an event from your hand. It costs 1 less. Now, events have been pretty prominent in Star Wars Unlimited, but not to the point of having full decks of events, with some minor exceptions, of course. We've seen some Iden decks, for example, that have nothing but events and other kind of removal. But in general, most decks run somewhere between 3 to 9 events. Now, of course, in a deck like this, where your leader wants to use an event every single turn, you probably want more than that. But being able to pay 1 less for an event is actually a pretty good effect. Being able to pay 1 less is akin to somewhat ramping, and we have seen quite a few other leaders offer discounts on units, for example. This is the first time we've seen it for an event. So let's check out some good events that you'd probably want to be using with Barriss that could be interesting with a discount. Obviously, the top contender is going to be Overwhelming Barrage, widely considered probably the best event in Star Wars Unlimited. For 5 costs, being able to not only make your guy stronger, but most likely clear out the entire opponent's board. So being able to pay just 4 for this is an interesting prospect. Of course, the argument against it is that if you are paying 4 for this, you're using this on turn 3, which means you need to have already established a good enough target to use this on in the first 2 turns. It's a bit harder to do, but not impossible. Of course, we also have things like Resupply. Resupply is particularly interesting with Barriss because it is a 3-cost event. So in order for you to use it on for the first turn, you need a way to generate the Force on the first turn, which is not impossible. Of course, we have the new rare green base that lets you use an action to generate the Force. So it is perfectly reasonable to expect to resupply on the first turn, and already being able to ramp when your opponent has nothing in play is a pretty good thing, especially if you are playing Command Villainy, which is one of the best late game colors. Now, of course, we can check out in other colors. We have Super Laser Blast, a board wipe for 8. Very often you'll find yourself in a position where, oh man, if I only had that 1 more turn to get the Super Laser, I could have survived. Well, Barriss lets you play that 1 turn earlier. We also have things like No Glory Only Results, or any other removal, whether it's Takedown, Power of the Dark Side, what have you. There are so many that one little discount often makes the difference between taking an extra 5 to 10 damage on your base. And No Glory particularly is a very interesting one, because being able to play No Glory on the 4 resource turn lets you steal some very key early game units that your opponent doesn't expect. Key notably, of course, being Super Laser Technician. That's usually played on 3. If you then just claim the initiative and do No Glory on 4, you're stealing it, killing it, ramping even more yourself, putting your opponent further and further behind. Some other notable targets, of course, being K2SO or the new ETH Koth, which is just another ramp card. Doesn't work too well with ETH Koth because you'll have to probably use the Force to play No Glory cheaper, and ETH Koth himself needs the Force. But nonetheless, you're denying your opponent ramp, or if you just wait 1 more turn, you can steal it, use your own Force and ramp. Honestly, just fantastic targets for Barriss to use. Very good way to play cheaper events, helping you survive to the late game more. Of course, another note is that while this effect doesn't usually work on units, there are ways and some cards that you can use to sort of cheat that out. Now, of course, if you somehow discarded your big cards, if you've somehow discarded for example, a Darth Vader or a Maul, which would normally cost 7, well, if you have Palpatine's Return in your hand with a discount from Barriss, you are able to play this on 5. So being able to put out a Vader on 5, so for example, if you're against one of those hand hate decks like Quinlan or any honestly red or yellow heroism deck in the next set, if they are discarding from your hand, if you just choose to drop your big guys and bring them out really early, you can counteract their game plan and make them regret doing it. Very good. And of course, it's not just Palpatine's return. There are things like now there are 2 of them that let you bring out something big. Of course, notably now there are 2 of them is used to bring out a 5 cost on turn 2. But instead now you could bring out a 6 cost on turn 2 because of the Barriss Offee discount. That opens up a lot more avenues of pardon my language, but like something more ridiculous, for lack of a better word. So there are easily ways to transform this event advantage into unit advantage. However, I think one of the most important things that from Barriss that it might be overlooked is the fact that you can be playing the low cost events that generally cost only 1 and sometimes are hard to fit into your curve, but you can play them for 0. Notably, of course, being Force Throw. If you are going to be playing a Force deck, Barriss herself is Force. I'm sorry, himself, I think herself. And you can play Force Throw for 0. Your opponent will not expect it. That is a crazy turn. And the same can be said for Force Choke. If you have a Force, it costs 1. Because of Barriss, it costs 0. We have Shoot First for 0. Timely Intervention, giving something ambush while normally an extra resource. You won't need that. We have Soresu Stance, being able to give Force to a unit directed by the Force, which notably, yes, it costs 0, but it refunds the Force yourself. I don't know why you would do this, but hey, just an option. Xian Flurry, another way to give ambush for 0. Giving stuff ambush for 0 is basically Energy Conversion Lab, but you're not trading that 5 health on the base, but instead you're trading a card in your hand, which depending on the matchup is significantly better. Now, of course, all that said, honestly, Barriss has a lot of ways to really be tricky, have it so your opponent simply cannot expect your plays, and in a game like this you need your opponent to be predictable in order to play around them. So having that unpredictability makes her quite a bit better. So where do we think she's going to land in premium? Honestly, I think she's going to be like a solid average leader. What's holding her back is probably the lack of Force support in her colors. We've seen quite a bit of Force this coming set, but quite the lack of it in villainy unless you are playing Vigilance. So if you are going to be playing Vigilance, villainy, you have a lot of options, mainly because of the Night Sisters, but otherwise the rest of the colors only got a handful, so it's going to be fairly difficult to generate the Force for Barriss. And on top of that, her being just a 4/7 for 6 doesn't offer any extraordinary advantage, so I think she's going to fall just a bit flat. But this is an effect that will be extremely powerful just in general, and a card that you're going to have to look back at every single set. Every time you see a new event that you can potentially play for cheaper, Barriss can come to mind. Now, as for limited, how do we think she's going to fit? I think it's about the same thing. There's a lot of low-cost events in this set. A lot of the 1 costs we named above are from this set. So being able to play them for free, or just in general, she's a fairly average leader. Lets you get an advantage. That effect will very often not go to waste, which is what you want in a leader. The stat line is fairly average, so you'll be fighting for the board. I don't think she'll stand out in either way. Won't be bad, won't be good. Just a solid leader for limited. Next up, let's check out Grand Inquisitor. Grand Inquisitor says, this time in Cunning, action, use the Force, attack with a friendly unit. The defender gets -2, -0 for this attack. Deploys on 5 as a 3/5 shielded. With on attack, the defender gets -2, -0 for this attack. Now, we already saw this effect in a very similar way with Jinn in set 1, and we have seen the giant splash that Jinn has clearly done in the meta, and in that I mean absolutely none. Jinn has been nowhere to be seen in premium. However, Jinn has had quite a bit of success in limited. We'll get to that eventually, but the point is that this is an effect that we've already seen. It's just a bit stronger now. Instead of being -1 attack, it's -2, but you do need to be using the Force. The advantage here is that if you are attacking with a Force unit, using the Force to attack with the Force unit will just generate the Force back for you. So in a way, you'll always have the Force available. It's like a train, I guess. That's good. But the problem with the Grand Inquisitor in this set is that, first of all, this is a very defensive effect. This is an effect for a deck that wants to build up the board and slowly cripple your opponent's units bit by bit so that you can then take over control in the end game. And unfortunately, Cunning is not the color that does that well. If you had an effect like that, you probably want that more in Vigilance or potentially even Command, but in Cunning, you're usually more aggressive. So having a very defensive effect like this is very strange. And what really accentuates that is the fact that there isn't a lot to support him in both this set and just in general in Swoop. We have some new good Cunning cards. We have Shin Hati, that is a force unit that you can use to generate the force, of course, but it is shielded. So I mean, unless you're already attacking something that has 2 attack or less to make it so you don't lose the shield, the effect doesn't really work too well with it. We have Dooku, which could be interesting, just another force unit. Can reuse your hiddens, I suppose. In blue, we have the minus effect cards. We have Snoke, we have Talzin's Assassin. Pretty good, I guess, with the effect. If you make something have -3/-3 and then you attack it with another -2 attack, yeah, you're most likely not taking damage back. You're keeping control of the board, which is good. We have Chirrut Imwe, which could be good in that it's the exact same effect but on defense rather than offense, so that could have some potential. And then if we're looking at the other colors, some interesting notes here is that you can use the Inquisitors that are clearly designed to be used here. We have the Inquisitor's Lightsaber that when attacking a force unit, you get +2 attack. So this is basically a +3/+3 if you're attacking force, or his own Corrupted Saber. If you attach it to a force unit, the defender can get another -2/-0 for this attack. So potentially if you're attacking something, you can give it -4 attack. For most things in this game, that's what they'll have. At most, they'll have 5 or 6. So that could be interesting, but in premium, setting up something like that will take so much time that your opponent will almost definitely have an answer. And honestly, his stat line being a 3/5 doesn't do it any justice either. Being a 5 flip is good, but in general, we've seen 5 cost leaders come in at a 3/7. So a 3/5, yes, the shielded is very good. It is very interesting, but it still puts him in range of one of the most common removal abilities in Takedown. So as soon as you flip, you can get takedown, which is even cheaper than your deploy turn. So that is a very key weakness for Grand Inquisitor. Honestly, with all that, I think in premium, he's going to be honestly one of the weakest leaders that we have seen so far. I don't think he's going to be completely worthless just because his effect is just a general good effect. It doesn't stand out in any way, and there aren't enough cards that support it, but the effect itself is a pretty decent effect, just not in Cunning. As for limited, however, we mentioned earlier that Jinn, while hasn't been good in premium, has been fantastic in limited. So surprisingly, I honestly think that Grand Inquisitor will be one of the absolute best limited leaders. Yes, his weakness is his stat line being 3/5, but there is no takedown in this set. So if you're playing in limited, there isn't any removal that can deal with this efficiently and quickly. And on top of that, he is shielded. He comes out early, which means all of these lightsabers in this set that are coming out, for example, the 2 that we listed here, but there's a bunch more, you can attach to him early on. And if you have a lightsaber on him, if you have 2 lightsabers on him, there is no way for your opponent to deal with this. There is so little upgrade removal in this set, and it's so targeted on certain aspects that if you get this guy out early enough, put some buffs on him, your opponent will pretty much have to concede. There is nothing they can do about it. So I think with that said, plus the fact that the ability itself giving something -2 attack is pretty strong and limited, because being able to maintain your units on the board when killing theirs is very strong in a meta with unrefined decks, in a meta where you don't have a lot of targeted removal or AoE removal. I think he's going to be extremely dominant. So it's very interesting to have a leader like this that is so weak in premium but very strong in limited. Makes it so the design space isn't entirely wasted. This game is not based entirely around premium. There is a very big limited aspect to it, so it's nice to have leaders like this that excel in that. Next up, we're going to take a look at Qui-Gon Jinn. Qui-Gon Jinn, famous for being cut in half, of course. This time it's his turn to cut people in half. The ability has been talked about forever. One of the first leaders revealed for this set says action, use the force, return a friendly non-leader unit to its owner's hand, play a non-villain unit that costs less than the returned unit from your hand for free. And of course flips for 6 on as a Force 7, Force Jedi Republic, fairly average stats, we've mentioned this many times, and when attacking, pretty much the same effect where you don't need to use the Force. Now, this is an extremely powerful effect. Being able to reuse your cards and play other cards for free has been talked about so much, and there is so many synergies that you could be using with Qui-Gon in almost every single color. So let's go ahead and check them out. So first off, let's check out Cunning, of course, in his own color. We have so many good ambush cards that can work with his ability. We have Han Solo, we have the new Depa Bilaba, which not only is an ambush, also a saboteur and force, so it'll generate the force that you need to flip anyways. Ahsoka doesn't have ambush, but having a good when played effect that you can just constantly reuse is very good. We have Vernestra, almost an ambush, you just need the force. Comes in, eats the force, attacks, regenerates the force. We have Plo Koon, another ambush. Honestly, all of these are extremely good, and what makes it even better in Qui-Gon is the fact that you can chain them back to back. If, for example, you're starting off your turn and you have the force token, you can play a Han Solo, attack with the Han Solo, kill something, then use Qui-Gon's ability, right? Han Solo comes to your hand, and Depa comes in, ambushes again, kills something else, and if for some reason you can flip your Qui-Gon at that point, you can attack with Qui-Gon, bounce Depa back to your hand, play a Plo Koon. You just attacked for 4 times, spending almost no resources. Of course, if the Han Solo was already in play, that's what I mean. But if you just played Han Solo, even just paying 7 to be able to get 3 attacks back to back. And the best part is those other cards didn't go to waste. The Depa went back to your hand, the Han Solo went back to your hand, so you can just use it again next turn. The amount of value that it generates is absolutely absurd. And even if you can't make something like that happen, if you just play a Depa, attack, and then at the end of the turn, or I mean after the attack, you just bounce it back to your hand and play an Ahsoka, not only did you kill one of their units, but you also made them discard a card, and now they have to deal with that Ahsoka, because if they don't deal with that Ahsoka, next turn you get to bounce it back to your hand, play a Vernestra or literally anything else, and then just play the Ahsoka back, just constantly reusing those when plays that are already very annoying to fight. Of course, some pretty good cards in other colors too. If you're going to be playing this with Vigilance, you have Luke Skywalker. Giving -6/-6 to a unit is one of the best plays we've seen in Vigilance heroism, and being able to use that. So if you drop your Luke, if they don't deal with it right away, next turn you can attack with it, bounce it, play something else, and then still play that Luke right back, because the initial bounce didn't cost you any resources. We have, of course, Redemption in a similar way. Redemption is very often just used for its when played ability. So if you already have the Force token, which let's be real, if you're at 8 resources, you probably do, you can drop the Redemption, heal 8 from not only your base, but like any combination of your units and your bases, and then immediately bounce it back to your hand, and hey, play a Luke. And then next thing you get to do it again. So if you get to that Redemption turn, nobody can just ignore your board and hit your base. You're healing so much, it's ridiculous. Of course, in the same vein, you have Anakin for more minuses. And then if we're going to be jumping to another color in Command, where I think, honestly, Qui-Gon, at least based on my experimentation, Command is where Qui-Gon shines extremely well. And the big factor of that is Yoda. Yoda himself comes in, uses the Force to heal 5 from your base, which is something you want anyways if you're playing a more board-centric deck, right? Eventually some damage is going to get through, so you need heal. So Yoda comes in, heals your base, and when you use the Force, you deal damage to a unit equal to twice the number of units you control. And what's very interesting about this is that if they do not immediately kill your Yoda, and you attack with something else, generate the Force, you can, on the same turn, bounce that Yoda back to your hand. But before the bounce happens, you're using the Force to return a unit. So you can use Qui-Gon, use the Force, Yoda's ability triggers, you deal damage to a unit, then you take Yoda back to your hand and you play something else. And that means on the next turn, you get to play Yoda again, heal 5, deal damage again. And at that point, unless they have immediate, instant removal for Yoda, that Yoda is just going to completely run over the game. It's going to single-handedly win you the game through anything. So if they're not holding that Fell the Dragon or Rival's Fall or anything of the sort, that you just can't do anything about the Yoda. Of course, there's a lot of other good cards in Command. We have Kelleran Beck when played, search the top 7, play a card. It costs 3 less, sort of like a Vader, except it doesn't actually limit you to playing something that costs 3 or less. If you are at 8 or 9 resources, you could play this and actually pull out a 4 or 5 cost card. Very often, honestly, Kelleran can come in and bring one of your ambush cards that we mentioned above, which is extremely important, because on top of that, not only are you ambushing something, you're generating the force. Kelleran can bounce back to your hand, play another ambush card, and next turn you get to Kelleran right again. Of course, Maz Kanata, just a very good card. Any deck that runs any force unit will be playing Maz, and on top of that, Maz being able to give something +2 attack and ideally take something off the board can immediately be bounced back to your hand and be reused every single turn. You have a pump that is reusable. That is insane. In any game, in any TCG that you play, be having that pump that usually doesn't do anything after played, being able to just take it back into your hand to play something else. If you take this back to your hand and play a Gungi, for example, yeah, you lost 1 power, but you gained 1 toughness. Sure, you didn't pay anything. So your board state is about the same as it was before, but now you have the potential for an extra 2 attack on any of your units at any point. So that's something that your opponent needs to constantly worry about, constantly pay attention to. Of course, we have other big cards that have very similar effects. Home 1, everything that we said about Kelleran stands. Jedi Consular is pretty interesting in Qui-Gon. While Jedi Consular usually works best in a blue deck that can run the new rare base, it is still a very deadly card in Qui-Gon. While you cannot abuse it immediately on turn 2, if you do have the force and then you end up using this on turn 3 or 4, you can get something extremely big out. Like, for example, you can get a Han Solo out early and start your chain that way, because even if you're only at 4 resources, you use this, you play something for 6, you can play a Depa at 4 resources and then bounce that Depa and play a Plo Koon. So while you are only at 4 resources, you just played essentially 11 resources worth of cards. So that Jedi Consular is an immediate kill on sight in this deck. Of course, some other very notable cards in Qui-Gon is Change of Heart. I think this is an extremely punishing play, very disgusting to have it done against you if you have something big in play. If your opponent, for example, plays I don't know, an Avenger or Darth Vader or something you don't want to deal with, well, you don't need to deal with it. You just claim the initiative, you Change of Heart, you take their unit. So either now they have to spend one of their cards to kill their own units, that means you get a 2-for-1, or if they don't, you get to attack with that unit, bounce it back to their hand, and play something of yours for free. So if you stole an Avenger, attacked, killed something on their side, dealt some damage, then you bounce it back to your hand and you play your own Kelleran Beck and you call out something else. That's just devastating. And then, yeah, sure, they can play the Avenger again, but at that point, is it worth it? You already have a lot of stuff on the board. You got rid of their card, you played a card, and it only costs you 6. Just an absolute must-have card in this deck. Very, very dangerous, very strong. In a similar vein, there are 2 of them. You are already playing the color of Cunning, so you might as well play this card if you are playing a lot of Force or Jedi units. I don't think it's mandatory, but it could be extremely powerful. In the same reasoning that we use for Jedi Consular, being able to trick out something very expensive very early can get your train rolling. Being able to get out a Depa on turn 3, for example, will probably kill whatever they have in play, and then you can bounce it, play an Ahsoka that keeps your Depa in hand for the next turn to use right over again. Just a very good card. And of course, in the same vein as Change of Heart, there we have a few other cards that could be useful. Traitor is a bit less so because it usually targets something too cheap for you to bounce and play something off of. But you have the Commission that you could, no, sorry, not Commission, Commandeer that you can be playing to steal one of their ships, steal their ship, attack, bounce it, play whatever you want. Pretty good. Now, of course, there's an argument to be made for a lot of the Falcon and Han combos, notably the Fast Falcon that they call it, where it comes in ready, being able to bounce your Ahsoka, play this, deal an extra bit of damage. You can make a much more aggressive centered Qui-Gon Jinn build. The only issue with this is that, of course, Millennium Falcon itself is not a force unit, so you might run out of force generation, and if by doing so you lose control of the ground arena, it's pretty hard to get force back. And of course, if you are going to be playing a Falcon, there's the other Falcon and there's Han Solo. Just in general, very good cards. Millennium Falcon has Ambush. You can use it in the exact same way as we mentioned previously. Come in, kill something, bounce, play something else. Han Solo, if you're going to be playing both Falcons, you might as well play Han Solo, because not only does it give you an insane pilot ability, but on top of that, hey, he's a 4/5 ambush on ground. And I have said ambush so many times here that if you can't understand how important it is for Qui-Gon, then I don't know what to tell you. There is, of course, something we'll talk about in double cunning. While I personally don't think if you're going to be playing double cunning, you want to be playing Qui-Gon, there are a lot of combinations that are extremely powerful and borderline disgusting in Qui-Gon when you're playing double cunning. Cantina Bouncer being one of them. For example, if you've played Ahsoka the turn before and you attack with it, then turn 5 you can play the Cantina Bouncer, bounce it back to your hand, play another Ahsoka or play something else. Forget having an Ahsoka on board, actually. If you just play this on 5, bounce something back to their hand, then play an Ahsoka, discard something else from their hand, and then you still have that bouncer in your hand, you maintain tempo control of the game so hard that your opponent will be extremely frustrated. It is one of the most annoying things to deal with, having anything you play immediately get bounced back to your hand, making it feel like you're not able to play the game. So there is an argument to be made for double cunning. The only issue being that a lot of these double cunning cards that you can abuse, like Cantina Bouncer, like the Mandalorian, of course, constantly being able to exhaust stuff, and Bodhi Rook constantly looking at your opponent's hand and discarding. These are very powerful effects to abuse. The only issue is they are not force cards, and if your opponent is smart and knows how to play against your deck, if they target your force units, you won't be able to generate the force easily when you're overloading your deck with non-force cards. All right, so let's talk about Qui-Gon. In Premium, I think he's going to be spectacular. He is easily going to be a 4-star, could potentially be more. The only issue with him is that this kind of deck that's reusing their cards non-stop and winning the board, it tends to be much more value-centric. So when you're playing a big guy, you're usually not leaving him in play to then deal damage to your opponent's base. You're usually playing it, dealing with one of their units, bouncing it back, playing something else to deal with another unit or deal with their hand or whatever. So you're pretty slow at killing your opponent. There are tools to help you with that, of course. You can be playing Surprise Strikes or Hotshot Blasters, but still you're not potentially an aggro deck. So Cunning is not where you want to be when you're not ending the game. If you are playing an extremely value-focused deck, you're going to run into those decks that are just greedier than you are. And whether you like it or not, Villainy, Vigilance, Command is one of those greedy decks that is extremely hard to outvalue. So even if you're being extremely careful and using so many of your cards like 3 or 4 times, there's a good chance that at the end of the game, your opponent is just going to drop something huge like a Devastator, and you won't really have an answer to it. So while this deck is extremely powerful in a lot of aspects, and I think it could be easily built to fight against either aggro or control, I don't think there is a possibility to have a build that excels fighting against both, which is ideal. You don't want a deck that's just stronger than everything, of course. So I think that aspect makes it so Qui-Gon is not quite a 5-star leader, but I think he's still going to make quite the splash into the meta. As for limited, you're not going to be seeing Qui-Gon much because, well, he's a spotlight leader, right? He's not in the set. So yes, you'll be able to play him in sealed at the beginning of the set, but you won't be able to have him in draft and any other sealed going forward in the future, unless you get extremely lucky and pull the showcase, of course. That said, I think he's limited. He's still very good, potentially even stronger. I would maybe even consider him 5-star just because of the sheer amount of force units in this set. But I don't want to overdo it because you're not going to be seeing too much of him. He's a one and done deal. Either you play him on your pre-release or you don't see him at all. Last up, we have Kestis, one of the only 4-cost deploy leaders that we've seen. The third one on the heroism side, second one in Cunning, of course. Before this, we have Sabine, we have Lando. Actually, now we have more. We have Kazuda, we have Von. Forget what I said. There are quite a few 4 deploy leaders, but this is following the same vein. It is a 4-cost deploy 3/4. But before that, let's see what he does. He says, action, use the force. An opponent chooses a ready unit they control and exhaust that unit. Now, most of the time, this translates to use the Force, exhaust the unit, because it's very, when you're going to be using this ability, you're going to try and maximize it by having your opponent only have one unit ready. That way you'll control what you are exhausting, but it is still a limitation that you need to keep your eye on, because you can't just use this willy-nilly. They'll just exhaust something that they don't care about and move on. However, the 4-cost deploy 3/4 is very interesting. It's a decent stat line. It's a little fragile, a little squishy, and that's kind of what you want to see in your aggro leaders when you're not the one playing aggro. But when you are playing aggro, you want it to be a bit sturdier. Of course, one of the most prominent aggro leaders is Sabine. She is a 2/5, which is essentially a 3/5 because on attack deals an extra damage to the base. So having that stat line be a little bit weaker is definitely a downside to Cal Kestis. But let's see what kind of cards we can have that synergize with him. Unfortunately, this is not an effect that could have too much synergy. It is a simple exhaust unit, so the only real synergy is generating the Force, and we can use a lot of other cards that generate the Force. We have Vernestra, which is going to be essentially the new Millennium Falcon, a very good card that comes in ready. Yes, it uses the Force, but if it doesn't immediately die, just generates it right back for you. We have Ahsoka Tano, just another Force unit that could be very disgusting to play with, and is usually a target to deal with. And it comes out on the exact same turn as Cal Kestis, it exhausts something. So honestly, if you do go into your leader flip turn, for example, you play Ahsoka Tano, they have to discard a card. Very often, if they don't have a unit, they will. If they don't have a non-unit, they'll discard a unit, you'll exhaust something, and then you can immediately follow that up with a Cal Kestis effect to exhaust whatever else they have. Just good combination. There are, of course, the cards that were kind of designed to be played with him, BD1 being his faithful companion, where Cal Kestis comes from in Jedi Survivor, for example, Fallen Order. Hidden, when played, choose another friendly unit. It gets +1/+0 and Saboteur. Saboteur is an extremely important card effect for an aggro deck, because most of the time you'll deal a bunch of damage in the early game and then you'll get stalled out by Sentinels. So being able to give your units or even your leader Saboteur semi-permanently is pretty good, because at that point, if you turn your Cal Kestis into a 4/4, you need to either deal with that 4/4 or deal with this 1/3, or you're just going to be hitting their base, and every time you attack, you're exhausting something. Of course, there's Stinger Mantis as well. A 5-cost ship, technically Cal's ship, right? But it is not a very aggro-based effect. It's 5-cost 4/6. It says when played, you may deal 2 damage to an exhausted unit. Yeah, I see why it might work with Cal Kestis, because you get to exhaust stuff and deal damage to it. But you don't want to be playing control and chipping away at their units when you're playing a leader that deploys on 4. You want to be ending the game as fast as possible. Of course, in that same vein, in red, we have Quinlan Vos, which could be interesting. It is usually a kill on sight target in any aggressive deck, and what you want on your turn 4 is an aggressive must-kill target, because if they waste their removal on Quinlan Vos, then your Cal Kestis is more or less free to come out and do whatever he wants. Why is Quinlan a must-kill target? Because 4/5 is already a pretty decent stat line. We've seen that's pretty par the norm for a 4-cost. We have a few 4/6s, but most of the time it's 4/5. And on top of that, his effect is if when attacking you have 6 or more power, you deal 2 damage to the enemy base. And there are a lot of ways to boost your power in this color combination. You have Hotshot Blaster, you have Surprise Strike, you have Breaking In, you have so many other cards. Any lightsaber upgrade, for example. So that needs to be dealt with. If not, honestly, if you do a Surprise Strike on the next turn, you're dealing 9 damage to their base. That's very hard to come back from. And in the same way, we have, of course, Hotshot Blaster. Works well with Quinlan, works well with Cal Kestis. If you're going to be playing the aggressive package, you could be playing the discard package. We have the new Jedi in Hiding. We have the good old-fashioned Force Throw. We have Spark of Rebellion. We have Will of the Force. Honestly, a discard package is pretty good, and being able to play that in an aggro deck it's not new, perhaps. Quinlan has had some aggro archetypes available, for example, but having a leader that's even more aggressive, it's exhausting all of your units, it's discarding all of your cards. That could be extremely frustrating to play against. So where do we think Cal Kestis is going to land? Honestly, in Premium, I don't think he's going to be exceptional, mainly because what he does, other leaders already do better. And on top of that, the limitations placed on him that you need to have the Force, which you don't underestimate. It's not that easy to have a constant stream of Force. B, the effect itself is very negative on your initiative, in that when you are using this, most of the time you will lose initiative, because if you start the turn and both of you have a unit in play and you use this ability, your opponent exhausts their unit, then they can't attack with it, right? So they're going to probably play something from their hand, and at that point, no matter what you do, whether you're attacking with your unit that you haven't attacked with yet or playing a new card, your opponent is likely out of actions, which means they'll just take the initiative and do whatever they want at the start of the next turn. So your leader ability didn't accomplish too much other than potentially stopping that one attack for this turn, but then next turn they have the initiative, they could attack with that anyways. In limited, how do we think Kestis is going to be? Actually, I think in limited he's going to be fantastic. I gave it a 3.5 star, but could even be easily a 4 star. And honestly, the reasoning is the same reasoning as Grand Inquisitor, is that he comes out very fast, very early, and there is a severe lack of removal, especially for leaders in this set. And you are able to Voltron this guy up way too fast. If you are able to flip this up on turn 3, and put a couple of lightsabers on him. If you put just a single lightsaber on him, if you put an average +3/+3 lightsaber on him, that is a 6/7 that your opponent needs to be dealing with on turn 4. And once again, with the limited amount of leader removal, with almost no upgrade hate in this set, you can run away with games before your opponent can even play 3 or 4 cards. I think that sheer speed of it is going to make it so Kestis can steal some games before your opponent realizes what's happening, and that's going to make him quite the good leader in limited. All that said, guys, I would love to hear your thoughts, your feedbacks, your comments. Once again, I love doing this for you guys, and if you guys like what you are seeing, please feel free to leave a like, a subscribe, a comment, whatever you want. I would love to hear your thoughts. Please tell me if you think I'm right on some things, if you think I'm absolutely off on others. And on that note, I will see you guys next time.